Have you ever wished you could just, think a message to someone and they'd get it? Well, today we're going to dive into some absolutely groundbreaking science that's trying to make that a reality by, get this, decoding our inner speech.
I know. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But this isn't a Hollywood plot. It's the very real, very serious goal of what's called inner speech recognition. And that's a field dedicated to, well, translating that silent voice inside your head into actual readable words.
So before we jump into all the tech, what exactly is this inner speech we're talking about?
You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's your internal monologue, right? That voice you're using to plan your day or maybe rehearse a tough conversation you need to have. Or just to think through a problem. It's literally a fundamental part of how we organize our thoughts and get through the day.
And this is where it gets really important. For people who've lost the ability to speak because of conditions like locked-in syndrome or aphasia, this kind of technology isn't just a cool innovation, it's a lifeline. It could offer a direct way for them to communicate and, reconnect with the world around them.
Okay, so how in the world do researchers actually do this? Let's zoom in on a specific experiment that really pushed the boundaries of what we thought was possible. Now, the goal here wasn't to read complex, abstract thoughts. Not yet, anyway. The researchers started with something much more basic. Could they train an AI to reliably figure out which of 4 simple words a person was thinking?
So to do this, they used a public dataset where 10 people just thought about 4 directional words: up, down, right, and left. And while they were thinking, their brain activity was being recorded using these non-invasive EEG caps that, just measure electrical signals right from the scalp. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. How exactly do you train an AI to find one specific thought inside all of that messy, noisy brain data?
Okay, so the best way to think about this is to imagine you're trying to hear one specific person's whisper in the middle of a packed, noisy stadium. It's a huge task, right? So first, you got to capture all the sound. Then you have to filter out the roar of the crowd. And in this case, that's stuff like muscle twitches and even eye blinks. Only after all that noise is gone can you start listening for the unique patterns in that one person's voice. And finally, you train an AI model to recognize that specific voice signature and connect it to the word they were thinking. So, after all that complex data crunching, how well did it actually work? Well, the results were both a huge step forward and a really fascinating puzzle. The model hit an overall accuracy of over 81%. Now, for this kind of non-invasive research, that is a massive leap forward. It shows that, this is genuinely possible.
But, and this is a big but, that 81% average hides a much more interesting story. See, when you dig into the results for each individual person, the AI's performance was all over the place. And when I say all over the place, I mean it. For one participant, subject 8, the model was an incredible 93% accurate. It almost never messed up. But for another, subject 4, the accuracy just cratered down to 55%. That's barely better than just randomly guessing. So what on earth is going on here?
Well, the reason for the difference is pretty fascinating. It turns out, for subjects like number 8, the brain map showed that thinking up lit up a very different set of pathways than thinking down. The patterns were super distinct, which made it easy for the AI to tell them apart.
But for subjects like number 4, that brain activity was just a jumbled mess. The neural signature for thinking up looked almost identical to the signature for left. The patterns overlapped so much that the poor model just couldn't tell the difference. It's a wild reminder that all of our brains, well, they think in very different ways.
And this whole individual variability thing isn't just some weird quirk of one study. It's one of the biggest challenges for the entire field. So let's zoom back out for a second and look at the hurdles that are still ahead.
One of the major challenges is just figuring out how to get the brain signals in the first place. This table kind of breaks down the trade-offs. You've got non-invasive methods like EEG, the one they used in the study, which is practical and pretty cheap, but the signal quality is kind of low. Then, on the other end of the spectrum, you have invasive methods like ECOG, where they place electrodes directly on the brain. That gives you an incredibly clear signal, but obviously it requires surgery and is only used in really extreme medical cases. So, the bottom line is this. Before this technology can ever become widespread, there are some enormous hurdles to overcome. We have to get way better at filtering out the noise from those faint signals. We've got to solve that whole everyone's brain is different problem, and we need much bigger and better data sets to train our AIs. And maybe the biggest hurdle of all,
we have to confront the profound ethical questions this whole thing raises.
So look, this journey to decode our inner voice, it's really just getting started. And as this science starts to creep out of the lab and into the real world, it forces us to ask some really big questions. It's not just about what's technologically possible anymore. It's about what kind of world we actually want to live in, a world where our thoughts might not be entirely our own. And that's a future that's, well, both incredibly thrilling and maybe just a little bit terrifying.